So thank you very much, everybody, for joining us in this story swap. And we just felt that given what is happening in the world, and it's such a dark time, really that hope would be a very good theme for us to share stories about. Just a couple of days ago, there was a story on the BBC about a man, Joe Ligon, and when he was 15, so this is a true story, he got in a bit of trouble with two young men that he had just met. And unfortunately, while they were doing a robbery, somebody was killed. Joe wasn't involved with that directly, but he was sentenced to life without parole, even though he was only 15. This was in 1953. And earlier this year, he finally got his release. 53 was the year I was born. He spent the whole of his life, well, the whole of my life, 68 years in prison. In the interview with him, the BBC, that what was extraordinary was that throughout those 68 years, he'd never lost hope. He'd always believed that there would be a solution and that he would find his freedom eventually. And it's a story, I guess, just because, it's exactly the same length of time as my life. And I just wonder how anybody can cope with that. And it's, for me, a very powerful story about the power of hope. But tonight, I think we're going to have a mixture of both true stories and folk tales, traditional stories. And so it's with great pleasure that we go over to Hong Kong, where there have also been some quite dark days, things not going perhaps as well as many people would like in Hong Kong, Lynne. So It's great to have you back with us, and we'd love to hear your story.
So, stories of hope. Let's just say that once and one time only, there was this kingdom, and it was a huge kingdom. It was a vast kingdom because the people lived in the walls of this kingdom, and the emperor who ruled those people was a kind and just emperor. They all liked him very much because of his honesty. But there was one problem. Nobody would go to that kingdom. Nobody would enter the great doors. But also, nobody would leave. And that was because there was this giant, this ogre that lived outside of this city, this kingdom. Everybody was frightened of it. Nobody dared go out and nobody dared go in. And so their food got less and less and less. And then they began to wonder, how much longer have we got before we starve? We have to find a way to get rid of this ogre, this giant that everybody is frightened of. We must find a way. Now, because their emperor was a just and kind man, they all knew that he was the very person to fight this ogre. And so they went and they begged and they pleaded, and the look and the trust and the hope that was in their eyes, he couldn't refuse them. Even though he was scared stiff inside, he could not show that. He looked at each and every one of them, and their eyes were looking into his, each one with hope, each one wishing him well. And so, without showing any fear, he put on his armor. He put on the armor on his horse, and he went to the large gates, which then opened up. He went outside, and the doors closed behind him. There was no going back now. Oh, well, he went forward and he trusted in the people and in him. He went forward, and it wasn't long before he got and met that giant. It was huge, it was horrific, it was the stuff of nightmares. But he could remember the hope that was in those people's eyes, and that's what carried him forward. But the strange thing was that with every step he took, it looked as though the giant got smaller. He got off his horse and began to walk slowly towards the giant. And indeed, the giant did get smaller. He could still see the hope in his people's eyes behind him. And with each step, he had the courage to go further and further. And each time that giant got smaller and smaller, until he got up to the giant itself. But then the giant was only the size of an ant. He picked up the giant and put the giant on his hand and said, "How can this be? How can this be that you are now so small? Who are you? Who are you?" And the giant, in now such a tiny voice, just called out and said, my name is Fear." And with that, the emperor put the giant back down onto the ground, and he turned around and he went back to the people. And there he was greeted with such a warm welcome. But the giant was never seen again. And so the people could go and come, and the kingdom, it prospered.
And everybody who tells it seems to have a slightly different version or a way of telling that story.
It's how everybody interprets it, and how, and you know, you can have the longer version or the shorter version.
Well, thanks for giving us the just right version. That was lovely. Thank you. It's strange, isn't it? Because normally when you get close to things, they get bigger. I often quote that line in Frozen, you know, when she says it's funny how distance makes everything seem small. And it's a good thing, you know, as we move away from the bad things, they tend to kind of shrink and we can manage them. And in this story, we've actually bring us closer and closer until we actually see it as being much smaller. Hey, Vranda, how are you?
Hi, I'm good.
And where are you joining us from?
Ahmedabad, the western part of the India, Gujarat.
Yeah, very good, very good. Well, I gather you've got a true story for us.
Yes, so it's the experience which I had a few years back. So I'm going to share that.
Wonderful. Over to you.
Thank you, Rod. 29 June 2005. It was raining heavily. I was returning back to Ahmedabad by train with my husband and my 2.5-year-old son. Suddenly, the train stopped at Dakor station, just 1.5 hours from my destination. Lights went out. We waited for 6 hours, and then darkness started setting in, outside and inside our hearts. There was a ruckus. Passengers were scared. When we got down, the railway platform was more like a lake. I lifted my son in my arms and we waded with our luggage in knee-deep waters. 8 more passengers joined us. We walked and waded for almost 1.5 kilometers, avoiding all the potholes in our ways. And finally, we spotted a guest house. It was a deserted one and water was filled around, but we thought it's just a matter of night, we'll manage. And we all moved inside and took shelter. We were relaxed after that tiring day. and went off to sleep. Boom! Part of the wall of my room collapsed and water started gushing in just like the movie Titanic.
Oh.
Frantically, I warned everyone around me. And we did not know what to do. We couldn't step out as it was water everywhere. Water started rising rapidly. Within 15 minutes, it was still our waist. I quickly grabbed the water bottle, lifted my son, and all of us headed towards the stairs, which was leading to terrace. Another half an hour, and 3/4 of the staircase was gulped by water. 11 of us squeezed in the last few steps, which were not immersed in the water. Now we knew this is a life-threatening situation. We heard rescue helicopters. Help, help! But the rain was louder than our cries. I said to my husband, "You are a good swimmer. Carry our son and go to a safe place. Don't worry. Don't lose hope. We all will be fine together." I clinged to this hope. More! Wailing sounds of the drowning animals made me felt that I'm going to be the next. The night passed with prayers, hope, and consoling my son. Everything will be all right. Next morning, water declined till our waist. There was a military man, Colonel Sanjay, and he helped us to come out from that guest room and guest house. Finally, we were out. We were thirsty, wet, and hungry. And all we had was a bottle with 1/4 liter of water, which we had to save. Did not know till when. Scene outside was vulnerable. Roads were flooded with water, waste, and dead animals. And the stench was enough to make us feel giddy. We waited and we saw a school. And we thought of climbing up the stairs to reach safely. But the last night had made us so weak with fear that each step felt like we've been climbing a hill. We dragged and pulled each other and finally reached upstairs. We felt like we've conquered a mountain. We all crashed on the benches and relaxed. It was late evening by then. After some time, we heard the cries of a lady calling for help. None of us had the courage to risk our lives again. But the military man, he stood up and in an instant he rushed downstairs. And when he saw that the lady was in her labor pain, he lifted her in his arms and waited for next 10-25 minutes till he found an hospital. He pleaded the doctor and stayed there, comforted the lady till she delivered. He was a true hero. It was 2 days by now. We all were hungry, thirsty, but we felt safe. After a few hours, rain stopped and the locals reached out to us with freshly plain rice. Believe me, that plain cooked rice is the tastiest meal I ever had till now. During this time, I realized that whenever there's a calamity or whenever we face these difficulties, God gives us strength to deal with that adversity if we don't lose hope. We all ate and we were happy that we all are safe and together. We rested for that night. Water level started declining a bit. It was our third day and rain had stopped. We decided to take the risk and move out. Reaching home was another adventure because the roads were blocked, cracked, damaged everywhere. But with the hope in our heart and by the grace of God, we made it to our home. This incident has taught me one thing, that live every moment and never lose hope. So now I do whatever I can for myself and for others. And I never lose hope. And I try to be the hope for everyone around me.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much. Thank you for sharing that story. You made it so vivid, and you know, with the water gushing in, that must have been so scary, Vranda. Really, you know, in the darkness and just not knowing, you know, the scale of it. I mean, you know, we've people have probably seen the kind of the footage of like the tsunami, so we have a a strong sense of what you know, this rushing water can look and sound like, and what you described, the waste and everything, the morning after when you came out. I hope you thanked your husband for keeping calm and saying, you know, that he was the one who first gave you the hope. So obviously a good man to have by your side.
Absolutely.
It's a very strong story and it should be heard. Thank you.
Thank
So
you.
we're going to stay in India for now. And Meera, hi, how are you?
Hi, I'm good and great to be here today to share my story with all of you.
And where are you speaking to us from? Where in India?
I'm from Bangalore, India.
Another of the hotspots. Very good. Very good. Yep.
Yeah, hotspots in more ways than one, unfortunately.
I'm afraid
Yeah.
so, yes. So why don't you share with us your story, please?
Sure. They and Marie walked on the roads, which were on both sides of which were the beautiful sunflower fields. But she wasn't walking alone. She was walking with a set of friends from school. The bag was swinging up and down, side to side. Few things fell down, but didn't seem to bother them because her friend was just telling them the most amazing story of the latest movie. When the hero actually jumped down and from a drone and to something which was flying, and then he picked up somebody and then he went up again. Wow, it was so amazing. And they both loved it. But as they were walking, Tenmuri was distracted because this was the place where she had to part. This was not the way to her house. This was somewhere where she had to go, and it was important that she went there today because the next day was an important day. It was the day they were going to get their papers, their answer papers. And she had a very important task to do before that. So she told her, Sari, go. I have to go through the shortcut. Shortcut, said her friend. This is your shortcut. Temuri was already halfway through, and she ran through the sunflower fields all the way to the small temple outside which was Selvarna and Pachai. So she ran up to Selvarna. Selvarna, where is Pachai? He's right there. He's right there. Why are you running? Where is he going to run away? Come, sit down. Tell me all about your day. No. I have to go home quickly. Call Pachai. Ah, okay. You have the money? Yes. And so Selvarna opened the door of the cage and out stepped Pachai, the little parrot. Tenmuri started praying. She just hoped Pachai would pick up the right card. This Pachai was also very, very not dependable, But she was the only source of hope for her. But it's okay. So, and then Pachai did come out and picked up a card and gave it to Selvarna. Tenmuri looked at Pachai. Did you do your job properly today at least? But Pachai went back to her cage where she got a little bit of berries to eat. Selvarna looked at the card and said, "Aha, Saraswati, goddess of learning, you are going to get 100. Tenmuri was happy. She gave the 5 rupees to him and ran home. The next day, she dressed up very well because she was going to get 100 for the first time, without studying that too, and went to class. The teacher came in with a stick and said, "Tenmuri, stand up. You have done something which nobody has managed to do till now in my entire career." 100. 0. I could not even find anything to give you a half mark. Now go home and write the paper all over again. This Pachai, he simply took the berries and the money and never told her anything, right? Why the other day, Pachai had selected a card. Selvarna said she would get so much love, and that day her mother gave her 2. Patar. She was really angry with Pachai. So then the next day she went there, she decided she'll go there. She will really teach that Pachai one lesson only. So the next time when she had to go there, just to scold him, she ran through the sunflower fields and stood. "Selvarna, Pachai is not right." Huh? Yennachi, what happened? Why are you so angry? See that Pachai? He said, Saraswati, I will. You did learn something. No, you learned that you won't pass an exam without studying. Okay. What is she going to tell me today? Pachai, come. So Pachai came out of the cage and looked at the set of cards. And then she looked at Tenmuri. "This time, Pachai, no cheating, huh? Please." Lakshmi, wealth, money, it's going to pour. Pour, baby, pour. Go. Run. Give me the money. She gave him the money and ran home. As soon as she went home, she went to the corner below her bed where she'd kept a box. She had told herself when the box was full of money, she would be rich. And the box was already half full. And today it was going to become full. She picked out all the covers and took out the box. Empty. "Amma, who took all my money?" "Who else will take your money? Look at your father snoring there. He must have given it away all on his drink." "Oh, so then, but Pachai, what Pachai?" "That Pachai said that it will pour money." "That Pachai, that parrot. Poor parrot. What will she do? She has to pick up the card, no?" "But Amma, I don't know why that Pachai doesn't fly away. She's always cheating me." "How can she fly away, Tenmuri? Wings are cut." "Really, Ma?" "Yes, that's why she doesn't fly away." That night, as Tenmuri slept on her bed, she thought, me and Pachai are the same. Even my wings are cut. And then she heard a little sound. It was a drip, 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 drip at first. And then something stronger sound, and then it was pouring. Her mother said, "Put on the blanket and go to sleep." She slept, and in her sleep, she heard a knock, 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 knock. She opened her eyes. There was someone at the door. "Come on, run, all of you, come on, run, outside, outside." It's raining, there's a flash flood. So they picked up all their things and ran. When they came back the next day, the entire house was down. This time, Dame Marie decided she's not going to leave this Pachai, liar bird. She stomped through the sunflower field and all the way, Selina! Selina was nowhere to be seen. There was a cage in a puddle of water and Pachai inside, all wet. Pachai, you said I'll get money? Pachai looked at her and looked down again. Come out! Let us at least fight properly. Pachai didn't come out. Why don't you want to come out? She put out a hand and Pachai climbed onto it. Are your wings cut? Pachai looked at her with beautiful eyes. Even mine are, Pachai. I don't think even I can fly. You can't do either. That's okay. I guess we both have to be here. She picked up some berries from the cage and gave it to the bird. And then suddenly she heard a small sound. It was the sound of someone trying so hard. She looked at Pachai. Pachai was trying to spread her wings. A tiny cut wings. Once, twice. You want to fly? And then, in the wink of an eye, Pachai flew a short distance and sat down right next to her. You can fly. Yes, you can fly. Maybe we'll both fly together one day. You know, I always wanted to fly to the top of that tree. Shall we try? And so, Dame Marie and Pachai sat next to each other, trying out their wings with the hope that they would reach the top of that tree one day. Thank you.
Thank you. I didn't see that ending coming. That's a lovely story. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for this opportunity to be part of this story.
Yeah. Good. I love the way you physicalize the story too. Very nice. Very nice.
Thank you.
So, Liz, I want to get you in before you have to dash off to do your next session. So, welcome. It's a delight to have you with us all the way from Ireland. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So we've been enjoying. Peder has joined us. I'm sure you know Peder.
Oh, I do. My problem child. Yes, I do indeed. Yes, I taught Peder. Yes.
So he's been on a couple of times. So we really like hearing the Irish accent. So please, the stage is yours. Tell us your story.
Thank you. And I'm going to do something I'm going to keep within my time, Roger, but as often happens, I'm opening my mouth to tell a story, another one hits me over the head. So here we go. I'm known as a teller of traditional tales. I don't do personal storytelling at all, but having heard 2 stories already today, 2 or 3 of them, I had to tell you this story. This is my mum. She lived till she was 92 years old, but it's because this story connects India and Ireland. So I thought I have to tell it. Our family lived on what was then called the northwest frontier of India. I grew up listening to stories about mongoose, about my brother and sister going to school on ponies, and I was stuck here in the wind and the cold and the rain of Northern Ireland. But this is the story. Our family traveled by train all the way down from Murray. It's Pakistan now, and Rawalpindi where they used to live, but they traveled all the way down to what was then called Bombay, and they embarked on ships to return to Northern Ireland. But the date was September 1939, and the Second World War broke out. And there they were on these big white ships, sitting ducks in the middle of the Indian Ocean. So they went to Mombasa in East Africa, and they had camouflage paint put on the ships, while the women and the children had picnics on a white sandy beach, and young boys would bring them coconuts. And it was like a dream to me to hear these stories. But my mother, who was only in her 20s with 3 small children, was worried. Because although they had life jackets on the ships for the adults, how would the children fare? My brother was only 2.5 years old. So my mother got out her old Singer sewing machine that I have on my windowsill here and made a life jacket for my brother Keith and for a small baby only 6 months old that belonged to her friend. When they embarked on the ships again, I'm sure you know your geography well, they went through the Suez Canal, out through the Mediterranean, past Gibraltar, up past the coast of Spain. And when they were off the coast of France, my brother was playing on the deck, my brother Billy, and he saw a torpedo shoot through the sea and bang, hit the Yorkshire, our friend's ship. Our family were on a ship called the Britannia, and the ships were spread out, as you know, in a convoy. But the Yorkshire exploded and started to sink immediately. Our family ship were called to action stations. They all stood on deck with their life jackets on, my mother in her hat and gloves, without which no lady would go out at any time, even on that occasion, holding the children by the hand, just praying. She said, it was the worst moment of my life. If these children go into the sea, they won't survive. But of course, you know I'm here. You know they made the journey safely back to Ireland. And when they got there, well, they heard the bad news. They heard of so many friends who had died when the Yorkshire sank, including my mother's friend. But in those days, you know, there was only one place to see the news. You ask children this, and they say TV. I say, no TV. They went to the cinema. Pathé News. And there on the cinema screen, in Armagh, my mother saw footage, black and white footage of survivors being brought up from the Yorkshire. And there on the screen, she saw a man carrying the little baby in the life jacket that she had made. The baby had survived even though his mother had drowned. Well, time passed. I grew up listening to this story. When my mother was 90, I took her out to an event I was hosting, World War II. What was it really like? And she sat there. She was the oldest person there. When it came to questions, excuse me, said this very English voice. It was my mother. And people answered her questions. But the BBC were there. And they said, who is this woman? And I said, that's my mother. My daughter was there as a journalist. She was going, it's my granny. So they said, could we come and interview her? Oh, she thought this was the best thing ever. So the BBC came and they interviewed her. And they put her up on the internet program. I'll put the link in the chat later. And up it went on the internet, Your Place in Mine, Nell Martin, Her Memories. And we got an email in from a Mrs. Olive James. It was a woman, actually, it was a female baby. She said, I was that baby. My mother was drowned and I was rescued and brought to Bordeaux. And I was able to tell my mother that 2 weeks before she died. So the reason I'm telling you this story, because it's called to me, is that we must encourage our older people to share their stories so that these stories will live on long after they've gone. And I thank you for giving me the opportunity to tell a story of hope that came from my own family. So thank you very much, everybody, for listening.
Thanks. Wow, what a powerful story, Liz. And I thought the moral was going to be about, you know, keep your sewing machine and you know, put it to good use.
Oh, it's here, but I'm not as talented as my mother.
Wow. Just the thought of making a life jacket for you know, someone that small.
Pork and nappies.
Yeah. But it's extraordinary, isn't it? It's the small acts of kindness that you have no notion of what their consequence might be, really. Thank you very much for sharing that story with us, Liz, indeed. And I think a good call to switch the story. Thank you. Thank you. So now we're just actually moving to another room in your house, I gather, as we say hello to Masako, who is one of our newest feast members. Masako, you have also a very interesting story, as people will no doubt detect when you start to speak.
Well,
First of all, thank you, Roger, for having me, and very nice to be here today. So my story, I wasn't sure whether it was Hope's story, but Roger said, yes, it is, so I'm going for it. But it's
Go for it, absolutely.
Go for it. And it's a traditional Japanese story, and some of you probably know, but Japanese story, folktales start with mukashi mukashi, and that means long, long time ago. So, mukashi mukashi, long time ago, there was a small kingdom up in the north of Japan. It was surrounded by tall mountains. The produce wasn't great. One day the king decided that the elderly who cannot do any more physical work must be taken to the deep of the mountain and to be left there. Anyone who shall not abide to this rule will be severely punished. In this kingdom lived a young man called Ichiro. His father passed away when he was young, so his mother raised him. She was loving, caring, and funny and smart. Ichiro loved her to bits. But the day came that she could do no more physical work. Ichiro had to take her up to the mountain. He carried her on his back and set off. His mother was so light. Feeling the warmth of her body on his back, different memory came into Ichiro's mind, and one of them was a lullaby. O Kolorio, Boya wa yoi kota nenne shina. It was the song that his mother sang for him when she was putting him to sleep, and she would pat his belly gently. And Ichiro remembered how he felt loved and feeling safe falling asleep. How terrible is this that he has to leave his mother in this mountain? And then Ichiro noticed his mother was breaking branches from his back. It was a trick his mother taught him when he was young, so Ichiro can find his way home so he wouldn't get lost in the mountain. Oh, mother, you know you cannot come back. I know, Ichiro. This is not for me. This is for you. I don't want you to get lost on the way home. Ichiro stopped dead. Tears ran down from his eyes. Oh, I just cannot do this. I just can't. He turned around and headed home. Ichiro, what are you doing? You're going to get into trouble. Don't worry, mother. I have an idea. Ichiro was good with his hands. He dug a hole underneath the tatami mat and he made a comfortable space for his mother to live. He hid her inside the house. Sometime later, a messenger came from a nearby kingdom. For some reason, he was carrying this huge log. And when he came to the king, he said, well, can you tell which side is top and which side is bottom? When I come back next time, and if you cannot tell me, we are going to attack you. Now, this kingdom was much bigger and they were well known for their strength of army. So the king and the king's advisors and all the king's men put their heads together and thought and thought and thought, but no good idea came to their minds. So the king ordered notice to be put out outside the castle, hoping some of his people can help him. Ichiro saw this and he went home and told his mother about it. Oh, that's easy, his mother said. You put the log into the water and the side that goes deeper into the water is the bottom. Ichiro thanked his mother and he rushed back to the castle and told this to the king. Oh, really? Said the king, and he ordered his men to put the log in the water. And indeed, one side went deeper than the other. So when the messenger came, the king was able to tell him proudly, Oh, so you solved that. Well, how about this one? And the messenger put out a coiled rope. Make a coiled rope out of ash. If you cannot do that, they are going to attack you. So once again, the king and the king's advisors and all the king's men put their heads together and thought and thought and thought. But no good idea came upon them. So the notice was put up again. Ichiro saw it and he told his mother about it. Oh, that's easy, she said. You put the rope into salted water and then dry, well, make a shape and then set the fire on. It will hold the shape. Ichiro did what his mother said, and indeed, it held the shape. So he carefully took it to the castle and showed it to the king. Oh, this is magnificent. The king was delighted. And when the messenger came, the king was able to produce it. Oh, I'm quite surprised you managed to solve that. But how about this one? Make a drum that beats on its own without anyone touching it. If you cannot make it, we are going to attack you in full force. So once again, the king and the king's advisors and all the king's men put their heads together and thought and thought and thought, but no idea. But by this time, the king remembered about Ichiro, so he called for him. Oh, young one, you are the smart one. Do you think you can solve this one? Ichiro went back home and told his mother about it. Oh, that's easy, she said, and told Ichiro how to do it. Ichiro went back to the king and said, Sir, if you put bees inside the drum and close it, it will make beating sound. Oh, I see, said the king, and he ordered his men to make the drum that way. And indeed, it beated on its own. The messenger came. Oh, I'm very impressed. It is obvious that this kingdom must have very wise king and the advisors. And it would be wise for us to become friends, not the enemy. So the treaties were made between two kingdoms, which was a great news for a small country. After the messenger left, the king called upon Ichiro. Oh, young one, you have saved this kingdom. I would like to give you a reward. Anything you want, just tell me. Ichiro thought about it for a moment, and he put all his courages together, and he blurted out, It wasn't I who solved all those problems, sir. It was my mother. I was supposed to leave her up in the mountain, but I just couldn't. But if it wasn't for her, none of the riddle would have been solved, sir. Please let me live with her, please, sir. Now this gave the king thunder-striking shock, because then it dawned on him that the elderly people may not be able to contribute physically too much, but they can still give many wisdom, lots of wisdom to younger generations. Oh, it was my mistake to think so lightly of elderly. I will take back my order. You shall live peacefully with your mother. So from then on, elderly people were cherished and well looked after in this kingdom. And Ichiro lived happily with his beloved mother. Oshimai, the end.
Wow, 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 wow. Oh, Masako, that is just fabulous, fabulous. We love the singing. Have a look at the chat, okay? Love the singing, goosebumps there. And of course, as one of those, very old people, I'm really pleased that you're telling that story. And I hope all the young people listening remember that those in our generation do have a role to play. Actually, storytelling is one of the few, isn't it, professions where people actually do recognise that seniors do have something very powerful to contribute. So you're always going to be welcome if you're telling stories about like that. Masako, absolutely. And you can expect to hear from us about the fest too, because we really want you to come back and tell more stories. And I have to say, it's just delightful because you are obviously so Japanese, and yet every now and again a phrase comes out that's just pure Irish. It's just fabulous. I love it. I love it. But it's your character. You know, it's who you are. And there are those of us who are blessed to kind of straddle two different cultures and to be part of that. So wonderful. Thank you so much for that story. So I'm now really excited. I'm going to take you all the way over to the west of the United States, to Portland, where Eric has been waiting very patiently. He got up at the ridiculously early hour of 4, or possibly even earlier, to make himself a cup of very strong coffee, I would think. Hi, Eric. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to Feast.
Oh, thank you so much for the invitation. It was delightful to be able to listen to all of the stories that have come already, and I'm looking forward to those that come after. Thank you so much.
Well, it's over to you.
Well, I would like to invite you to come with me to the city of Prague in the Czech Republic. It is a beautiful and historic city. On one side of the river, there's the old town, and adjacent to it is Wenceslas Square, a huge pedestrian zone which has been a gathering place for all sorts of reasons for hundreds of years. A little over a mile away, on the other side of the river, is what's called the Castle Complex. It's been the center of government for 6 centuries, from the Kingdom of Bohemia through the Communist Politburo to the present Czech Republic. We're going to come back to these two places, but before we do, I want to tell you that on my very first day in Prague, I fell in love with the warren of twisting streets in the old town. Some of those streets had been there since before Christopher Columbus set sail across the Atlantic. And these streets seem to be filled with architecturally interesting buildings that are decorated with a wide palette of colors. They have elegant and, in some cases, eccentric ornamentation, so that every time I turned a corner, a new smile came onto my face, corner after corner after corner, until I came to a street that seemed somehow oddly familiar. And remember that I had never been in Prague before that morning, but I already knew the gentle curve that the street made to the right. I was familiar already with the facades of the buildings over on the left. And yet, somehow, the view wasn't right. Something seemed to be wrong. It was almost as if the colors were incorrect. And then it hit me. A black and white photo of this street, taken from exactly where I was standing, but taken back in 1968, when this street was filled with a string of Soviet tanks, cannon muzzle to turret, to muzzle, to turret, to muzzle, to turret. Yes, in a figurative way, I had once before been here. It was when I had read the eyewitness reports of the Warsaw Pact's military invention during what is now called the Prague Spring. That photo and that report were perhaps the very last pieces of journalism that made it out to the West before the communist censors completely closed down all communication. And yet, the spirit of the Prague Spring lived on. A decade later, in 1977, writers and artists and religious authorities, civic leaders, they came together to document and publish the failures of the Communist Politburo in implementing the promised human rights provisions. Václav Havel, the country's prominent playwright and essayist, played a central role in all of this, for his writings captured the spirit and the depth of this movement in words that resonated with his fellow citizens, word pictures that were clear and irrefutable. His writings were labeled as subversive, and he spent years in jail. By the time he was freed in the late 1980s, all of Eastern Europe was in the upheaval. The world was changing. In neighboring Poland, Solidarity, the trade union, had won concessions from the communist government. And in 1989, Solidarity wins all but one seat in the Polish parliament. And a few scant months later, the Berlin Wall falls and communist East Germany begins the very quick process of ceasing to be a separate nation. And just 2 weeks after the fall of the Berlin Wall, Czech citizens begin to gather in Wenceslas Square, their hearts full of yearning for change, hoping for some kind of transition. Technically free to move about, Havel himself is still forbidden to arrange any kind of public meetings. But Havel is a playwright. He's an artist. And artists have friends. One of Havel's friends is the country's leading rock star. This rock musician gets permission to hold a series of concerts in Wenceslas Square. The authorities feel that the music might distract the people from all the changes that are happening in the neighboring East Bloc countries. But this permit comes with one proviso: the concerts cannot be advertised. Yet this is fine with the rock star, because he knows there isn't going to be any time to advertise anyway. He plans on holding the first one the very next evening. He'll just rely on word of mouth. And that next night, there are 25,000 Czech citizens in Wenceslas Square as the rock band plays on a balcony overlooking the square. And when they take a break from the music, the rock star announces that he has a friend who'd like to say a word or two to those who've gathered. And he takes the microphone and he hands it to Václav Havel, who then speaks of the wishes for freedoms, the longings for liberties, the hopes for those ideals, what his fellow citizens have been holding in their hearts for more than a dozen years, but have been afraid to speak out loud. Havel gives voice to these yearnings, to these desires, to these dreams and hopes. And the next night, the exact same thing happens, except there's close to 50,000 people present. And the third night, there's 100,000. And while all of this is happening, the Communist Politburo is huddled in their offices a mile away. Some might say that they were hiding there, awaiting instructions from the Soviets. And those instructions never come. So the Politburo is, perhaps for the very first time, forced to make plans on their own. And yet they are frozen into inaction by indecision and uncertainty. And the next night, 250,000 people turn out, and then 500,000, and then 1 million people, which is an amazing number because Greater Prague is home to only 3 million people, meaning that 1/3 of the people have come together, and they are standing there crowded in what can truly be described only as standing room only. And yet, with all the music and all the crowds, the atmosphere is calm and orderly. Oh yes, there are soldiers who are there. They've been ordered to crush at any first sign of subversive activity. But there are photos of those soldiers standing there with their rifles leaning against the buildings behind them as they stand there wide-eyed, listening to Havel during the breaks in the music. And on this last night, Havel reaches into his pocket and takes out a set of keys. And he begins to jingle them. And as he does so, he says, "This is the sound of the shackles of tyranny being opened. This is the sound of the chains of oppression being cast off." And without prompting, people in the square take out their keys and they begin to jingle them along with Havel until there are close to 1 million sets of keys ringing together in a sound that spills into the air and resonates and can be heard over 1 mile away at the castle complex, where the Communist Politburo is still huddling until 2 days later, the entire Politburo resigns and brings to a peaceful end the communist era in Czechoslovakia. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Eric. Thank you. I hadn't heard that story. I am a fan of Václav Havel, and I actually had the pleasure of directing his play The Memorandum here in Singapore, which back in the 1980s perhaps had the PAP government was perhaps very bureaucratic. He wrote the play before the Prague Spring, but it certainly resonated particularly during that time. As you're telling that story and about the sound of freedom, and I'm just reminded of that line from probably what one of my all-time favorite movies, The Shawshank Redemption, when the main character says that hope is a good thing and maybe the best of things, and good things never die. And that's what Havel held out to people, didn't he? Thank you very much indeed.
And captured for the people there. Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's now a pleasure to move just not so far away from Prague to Croatia, where Mary. Good. It's been a long time. It's great to welcome you back. You haven't told a story on this platform for a very long time, too long.
Yes, really.
So it's great to have you back.
It was my first and last in 2017, really. It was really lovely. And I was telling a Czech folk tale that time. So we have a connection, really.
Amazing connection. So go on, Mary, over to you.
Okay, thank you, everybody. I will bring us back to the United States with an Appalachian story. Just Roger texted me because I was not sure of the source. So I have a little bit, a slight different version maybe for those of you who might know it. So, dear friend, story lover, this is a story of two men, actually, two brothers. They were farmers, and for many years, what brothers usually do, they shared everything, their skill, their knowledge, their tools, their machinery. They worked on so many projects together, and there was harmony between them and their farms. But you know what? One day, one brother told one thing, the other brother understood other. And what was conversation turned into an argument, and the argument turned into a fight, and the fight ended with silence. They stopped talking, and it went on for weeks. No words between them. And one day, one of the brothers heard a noise. He looked outside, and he saw his younger brother with a bulldozer, and he was digging a deep, long channel, and that very same day, he filled it with water. And very soon, some insects and mosquitoes started to brew their families there. And the other brother, he was so angry, so furious, he didn't know what to do. Many sleepless nights. And one morning, he was off to town to do some things, and there was a knock on the door. He opened, and there was a stranger with a long, dusty coat, but kind eyes. And he said, "Good morning, sir. Well, I am the skilled carpenter, and I can see you have a beautiful farm here. Maybe you have some jobs that needs to be done, and I need a work, maybe for a day or two." And the man looked at him. At first he thought, no, I don't want strangers working on my farm. But then he saw that, we can call it creek, with still water. And he said, I have a job for you. Please build me a fence you see next to that creek. And it has to be 2-3 meters tall. That creek wasn't here just maybe a week or two long. It used to be a beautiful meadow filled with flowers where bees all day worked so we could have the best Christmas honey. And now, look at that. That's my neighbor who did it. It's not actually a neighbor, it's my brother. And we were used to be very good to each other. And now, after an argument, we stopped talking. And now he digged this long hole. I don't want to see that till the rest of my life. So build me a fence. And the stranger, the carpenter, said yes. And the man showed him the lumber and the nails, and he was off to town. And very soon, on that farm, you could hear a noise. The sawing, the hitting, the digging, and the nailing. And those noises, the other brother heard them. So he looked outside from the window, but then he got out, he came closer to the creek, and he saw a stranger. And he said, "Hello, good morning." "Oh, good morning, sir. What can I do for you?" "What are you doing?" "I am building." "What are you building?" "Well, I have a special project from your brother. Maybe you would like to come and help me." No, I don't speak with my brother." "But that's strange. He told me that you are the great in building, and if I need any help, I should ask for you." So the younger brother jumped over the creek and they joined hands together. And they worked together, well, when the sun almost decided to hid behind the woods. Then they finished, they shook hands, and the younger brother was off. But the elder brother returned from the town, and he was eager to see that beautiful fence. But oh boy, there was no fence there. But what he saw, it was the most beautiful bridge. He couldn't believe. He came closer, and on the handles, he saw the carvings, the same as his brother is known. And he saw his brother and said, "Brother, did you help this man to build this bridge?" "Yes, but after all the things I told you, you decided to help and build this bridge?" And he said, "Yes, because he asked me, because you told him I am the best builder." So they looked at each other. They came on the bridge, they walked, they met in the middle. And if you look careful, you can see a tiny tears in their eyes. Then they hugged each other. And then the elder brother remembered. He turned around and he saw the stranger, the carpenter, who was picking his tools, and he was off to go. He said, "No, stay, don't go. I have more projects for you." But the stranger looked at him and said, "You know, sir, my job for today is done. But unfortunately, I cannot stay. I have more bridges to build." And this is where the story ends. Thank you all.
I really like that ending. Yes. I have more bridges to build. And that's what gives us hope, isn't it? There are people in this world who are going there and building bridges. And sometimes you need that somebody from outside, don't you, to come and who is not emotionally connected, who's not involved,
Yes.
who can share that skill, that wisdom, or a different perspective and bring two sides, two groups together.
Yes,
Thank you.
definitely.
Thank you. You said very.
Thank you for having me.
Our pleasure. Yeah, love the ending of that story. From Croatia to Canada, Selina.
Hello.
Hello. Yes, and it's really great to have you with us to tell. I've seen you many times in our sessions. Thank you for your support on the swaps and in the webinars and stuff. But it's great to actually get to hear you to tell. Where is it? Is it? Was I right? Montreal.
You're right. I was just making coffee at that moment, so I didn't rush back to shout it out.
Very good. Well, I hope you're now,
More awake?
collected and caffeined up. Very good. Off you go. Over to you.
Thank you. What a wonderful, warm welcome. Okay. Benaiah. That was his name. He was the captain of all the guards in King Solomon's army, in King Solomon's reign. And King Solomon loved Benaiah because he was trustworthy, he was honest, he was a good man. He could do anything that King Solomon had asked, but he did it quietly. Very, very quietly, a quiet man of action. And yet one day, when King Solomon was walking through the palace, he overheard Benaiah bragging with younger soldiers about how he could do anything that King Solomon laid out for him to do. And King Solomon was horrified. This was not okay. He needed to teach Benaiah a lesson. He wanted to humble him. And so he quietly walked away. That was not the moment to do it. He went back and he thought of a plan. Shortly thereafter, he called Benaiah to his chambers. Benaiah came and he bent down low. Your Majesty, what can I do for you? Well, Benaiah, you won't believe this, but there is a ring that I've heard of that is magical and wondrous. Oh, tell me more, Your Majesty. I will look far and wide for such a ring, but I need more. Well, from what I've heard, they say that this ring can make a happy man sad and a sad man happy. Imagine that. Oh, Your Majesty, I will search far and wide, and I shall bring you such a ring. Good. In that case, you have 6 months to do this job. Benaiah bent down low. He was dismissed by King Solomon, and King Solomon sat there when Benaiah was gone, with a twinkle in his eye and a chuckle in his heart, for he knew that this was an impossible task. The next day, Benaiah left. He went to Jerusalem. He went straight to the goldsmiths. Have you ever heard of a ring that can make a happy man sad or a sad man happy? They shook their heads. Never heard of such a wonder. He went to the silversmiths and the coppersmiths. None had heard of such a ring. He began to think that maybe this was a local legend. He went into the marketplace, to the bazaar. He asked every single merchant. He searched through every single stall. But after weeks, he came up with nothing. He began to think again. Perhaps this ring exists, but it comes from a far-off land. And so he thought immediately of the caravan traders and the traders of gems. And so he got on his horse and he went straight to the route where the people came from far away. Every camel driver that came onto that path, he would ask, have you ever heard of a ring that can make a happy man sad or a sad man happy? Oh, they tugged at their beards, they scratched at their heads, they searched through the baskets, but none had ever heard of such a wonder. And this went on and on for weeks. He went to different routes, and finally he had the idea, okay, maybe it comes from an even farther spot. Perhaps I must be going to the ports where ships come in from far, far lands. He made his way to the ports, and every boat that came in, every captain that unloaded cargo with his men, he would ask the question, but they would shake their heads. They allowed him to look through the cargoes. No one had ever heard of such a magical, incredible ring. The weeks rolled into months. The months were passing on. It didn't matter if it was a ship from far away or a small seafarer in a small boat. It did not matter. No one had heard. And then, as time went on and Benaiah was starting to lose hope, he wondered if maybe King Solomon had this rumor because it was a local ring, a local legend. And so he once again got on his horse and he decided, I will go to small towns and villages on our land. And he did. And he asked far and wide. Sometimes when he would meet with very rich people and he'd say, have you ever heard of such a wondrous ring? They would look at him and say, well, if we did, we wouldn't want a ring that could possibly make us unhappy. We are happy, we are jovial. We wouldn't want a ring like that. And when he would go to those places where impoverished people lived, people that were downtrodden, and he would ask them about this wondrous ring, they would say, if only such a ring could exist to make sad, unhappy, melancholy people happy. Well, that is a ring that we would want more of, and we would share widely amongst our brethren. The months had rolled on so much so that it was nearing the end, almost near 6 months. Benaiah got back on his horse and he went back to Jerusalem. He was downhearted. He was distressed. He was about to fail, but there was still light. So he went back to Jerusalem. He went back to the market square. He again looked through every single merchant's merchandise. But as that sun started to lower, he knew that it was over. He was going to fail. He began to walk back towards the palace, his feet kicking up the sand on the dusty path. And then he noticed a young boy sitting with a very tattered mat. And on that tattered mat were trinkets, rusty, maybe even tin-like. But as that sun was setting, there was glistening, so he dropped to his knees and he began to rifle through everything. Tears flowing down. The young boy said, "What are you searching for, sir? Maybe I could help. Tell me, why are you crying?" Benaiah told him the story. "Oh," the young boy said, "that sounds like an incredible ring, and I am far too young to know of such wonders. But my grandfather, he has lived many a year, and he's heard many a story. Perhaps he knows." And the young boy went off into the shadows. He went into a small little hovel and he asked the grandfather. The grandfather came out, his skin all leathery and full of lines. "Tell me again, what is it you're searching for?" A ring that could make a sad man happy and a happy man sad. Do you have such a wonder? Oh, I need it. I must have it. The old man lifted his hand and said, "Give me a few minutes. Perhaps something's reminding me." He went back into that hovel. Benaiah could hear some tinkering and some scratching and some work of wonder. Who knows? That man was busy. And soon enough, the man came out. He had a shiny gold ring, a single band. He gave it to Benaiah and said, "Is this the ring you search for?" Well, Benaiah took it. Of course, it was a beautiful gold ring, but his heart was broken until he turned it in such a way that he saw 3 Hebrew letters inscribed, etched into the opening into that round part of the ring. "Yes, indeed, I know these letters. I know the words. Yes, this is exactly the ring. Thank you." He now had tears of joy. He put it in his pocket and he took out some coins and he gave it to the old man. He gave it to the young boy and he bid them goodbye. And with a heart full of joy, he went back to the palace. Oh, he slept like a baby that night, and in the morning refreshed and dressed and went to see King Solomon. When he arrived, well, there was a feast going on. Musicians, people dressed in glorious garbs, wine, food, and King Solomon sitting on his throne in such a jovial mood, laughing and sharing and talking with everyone. But when he caught eye with Benaiah, well, he decided, I shouldn't make him sit in his humiliation for too long. Come, come, Benaiah, come. Do you have what I have requested, that quest I sent you on, that very item? Benaiah bent down low. He greeted the king and then pulled out the very ring. He gave it to King Solomon. King Solomon took it, looked at it for an instant, and tossed it from hand to hand, still jovial, still joking around with everyone, until he took a closer look. And in that time of looking more closely, he saw the 3 Hebrew letters. There was a Gimel, a Zayin, and a Yud, and each letter stood for Gam Ze Ya'avor. And suddenly, the happiness was washed away from his face. He held that ring in his palm. He knew what those words meant. He looked up. He looked around at all the grandeur, and in that very moment, everything stopped. Everyone just stared at the king. Those words, they meant, this too shall pass. And he knew that all the grandeur, this feast, the people, he himself would someday be dust. Perhaps no one would even remember this moment, the ring, the story. He immediately got up off his throne. He bent down low in front of Benaiah, his faithful servant, and he pleaded with him for forgiveness. Oh, Benaiah, I tried to humiliate you. I wanted to teach you a lesson, but I have learnt the lesson in humility. And in that moment, he removed his own ruby red ring that he always wore on his finger, and he placed it upon Benaiah's finger as a gift and as a show of please, begging for forgiveness, of brotherhood. Benaiah helped the king up. The 2 men hugged, and King Solomon returned to the throne. He took that ring with the special message. He put it on his own finger, and as the music and the festivities began again, well, King Solomon turned that ring in his hand, and he remembered from that moment on on forward that he would always rule with wisdom and with humility. For this too shall pass, and there is hope.
Wow. Thank you, Selina. Thank you. I love the way you tell. I feel very privileged. I feel I've just been sat across your kitchen table here, and just you sharing that story, and I'm sure everybody else feels it as personally as I do. It's just magical that we can have these moments when we connect with each other through a story. Thank you. I couldn't help noticing you seem to have some very beautiful rings too on your fingers. Does one of them actually do the trick for you?
It's a 30-year hope.
Lovely.
But I have to say, when I first heard this story, I have kept it with me, and I think of it all the time because I think it is just a story that is important, and as difficult as things are all around the world, if we keep that notion that this too shall pass, I mean, there will be brighter days, and there's always hardship. So I love this story deeply.
Yeah. I particularly like the ending of the story when Benaiah comes back and gives him the ring, and how you do the transition both from the joy to the sadness, and then from the sadness back into the joy, which is really at the heart of the story, that we see the ring in action. And I thought you dramatized that, emoted that beautifully. Thank you.
Thank you for
Well,
having
we have time for one more session, and I'm really glad that we're actually going to hear it live. Pretigaya wasn't really sure. She actually went to great lengths and recorded it just in case. So it's wonderful to welcome you here. And I hope you read my message, because you're not a member of Feast, are you?
No, I'm not yet.
Look at that smile. Look at that smile. Okay. And I'm saying, why not? And I hope that after tonight that you might be tempted to actually come and join us
I will join you.
Great. So over to you, and let's hear your story.
Okay, thank you, Roger. Thank you, everybody, for your wonderful stories. We've had a good variety of them. My story is again about a little boy who wanted to meet God. One day, Rake, about 7 or 8 years old, decided that today I wish to meet God. Now, the previous day, his mother had told him a bedtime story in which she said that God lived far, far away. He remembered this, and so he went well prepared. He packed a bag with some fruits. It was a season of mangoes, so he added his favorite fruit, mangoes, a few drinks, a bottle of water, and off he went, looking for God. He walked and 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 he walked, and then he got a little tired. He decided to take a break. He found a park. He thought, I'll sit there and eat a little bit. He found a bench. He went and sat there, and there he noticed an old woman sitting beside him. She looked really sad, upset. She was looking far away, just staring at the pigeons. Ray did not know what to do, so he just opened up his bag. He took out a mango and he was about to eat when he remembered, it'll be rude not to offer, right? I should offer some to her. So he picked another mango and he gave it to her. The old woman gratefully took it and she smiled at him. Oh, Ray really liked that smile so much. He wanted to see it again. Maybe I'll give her some water. So he took out his bottle and he offered her the water. Once again, the old woman took that bottle and she smiled at him. Oh, Ray had completely fallen in love with that beautiful smile. The whole day, he kept giving her those mangoes and drinks. The two of them smiled, shared, ate, drank. But interestingly, they never shared a word. They just sat there quietly enjoying each other's company. It was almost evening. The sun was about to set. Rick realized he's quite tired, and also he needs to get back home in time. Mummy would be worried. So he just got up, took his bag, and he walked away. When suddenly he stopped. He turned, he rushed back to that woman, and he gave her a nice, tight, big hug. The old woman gave him her biggest smile ever. With that smile on his face, Rake went back to his house. Ding dong! His mother opened the door and she was surprised by the smile on his face. She said, Rake, what put that smile on your face? Where were you? What did you do today? Oh, you know what, Ma? I went to meet God today and she has the best smile ever. In the meantime, the old woman too went back to her house. She rang the doorbell. Her 4 sons opened the door. And they were shocked and surprised to see a smile on their mother's face. They said, Ma, you're usually sad, upset. What put that beautiful smile on your face? The old woman replied, you know what? I met God today. And he is much, much smaller than what we think. Thank you. That's my story.
Oh, I love it. I love it. What a great story. What a great story. Okay. And I have to say, if anybody's going to tell a story about someone with a fabulous smile, it's got to be you. What a wonderful smile that you have, really, Pretigaya. You know, it just kind of lit up the whole screen. Fabulous. As I was listening to that story, it reminded me that there's another very, very short story. The father comes home and he sees his daughter, probably maybe, I don't know, 4 or 5 years old, and she's busy drawing. And he says to her, "Oh, that's interesting. What are you drawing?" And she said, "Oh, I'm drawing God." And he said, "Really?" He said, "But nobody knows what God looks like." And the girl says, "They will when I finish drawing." So,
I love the concept.
because unfortunately we have come to the end, and as Selina did tell us, all things, this too shall pass. We have come to the end of this session. So thank you. Can we give a big round to all our tellers? Everybody, as somebody said, what wonderful diversity. People speaking from the heart. We really appreciated the personal stories we had. I hadn't realized Meera had shared an original story, one that she created. And that was because she had a very good story that she wanted to share. And she has been trying very hard to get permission from the publisher or the author. But because she couldn't get that, we really, this is something we feel quite strongly about, that we shouldn't be sharing stories if they're not in the public domain, if you haven't got permission from the author. So very gamely, she said, "Okay, I will tell my own original story." So thank you, Meera. And again, thank you to all of us, those of you who shared traditional stories and put your own spin on them. So thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing you again very soon.